Welcome back to the Burstimo Music Marketing Podcast. Today we are discussing where you're going to start as a musician. You've literally got nothing. No music, no artwork, no logo, nothing. Where do we go?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the plan with this podcast. But if you have released stuff already, this is still fitting for you because we're going to be talking about how to promote pre-release, whether that's your first single or your 10th. I think the reason we're doing this though is because we didn't realise that a lot of you guys actually haven't released yet. You're kind of looking at releasing, you're looking at finding your style, your image, and that's why you take in our content. But
I suppose that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about doing something, you research it first to make sure it's for you and you start consuming content. So I guess that's on our part. We're starting to learn about our audience and who's watching.
So what do you think is the first step? So someone... They've created music in their bedroom. They've realised they like music and they want to pursue it. Where do they start?
Genre?
Yeah,
I think they've got to
so.
define their genre first. And I think it's got to be a genre that you like creating. See a lot of artists who go out there and try and find the audience first and say like, Billie Eilish's style is really taking off. I'm going to go do that. And you're just always going to end up being like, a second grade Billie Eilish. So find your genre, know what you like, and then pick it and stick with it.
Do you remember, I think this was probably, I don't know, like 3-5 years ago, where everyone would get a rapper in their song because they thought the only way to chart was to have a rapper.
Yeah.
And then they basically would have like a ballad, and then halfway through it'd be like a rapper, because in the early noughties, Rihanna did it, and like they had like Eminem and like Jay-Z featuring in their tracks.
That never registered with me. I've just realised that now, that there was just a rap trend in like the
it was
2000s.
Weird, and I think that's the proof in itself that people try to create music that is going to get an audience when it should be the other way around. You should create music originally for yourself, and then it just so happens that you can get an audience from it, because the most successful musicians in the world are the ones that do it because they love it. Because I think the worst thing ever is following a trend to a point where you're creating music you don't like. Because say you do blow up and you're really successful, you're stuck in that genre. It's so difficult to do a jump.
You can't replicate it either. So you don't know where that came from. You don't know where the inspiration came from for you to continue putting out that style of music, because you just kind of made it up because you don't really like that genre. You're doing it for someone else, and you don't know what that someone else likes. But if you like your genre and your music, and you like, and your audience likes it, then of course you can continue creating that style of music to that standard.
I think it will come quite naturally to the majority of you, because you'll just be creating music and it will just so happen that it's in one specific genre. I think a lot of songwriters find that they just naturally write in a genre.
Yeah.
So I think once you've done that, you need to work out kind of what you want your image to be, how you want to portray yourself to your audience. And that's all the branding, basically. When artists come to us, we help them with their branding. So that could be logos, that could be a colour palette, that could just be their overall social media image. Where do you start with that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we rarely have an artist who doesn't have that already come to us. Normally artists have it in mind.
Some want a rebranding though, which I think is an interesting one. Like, rebranding is a big step, but definitely necessary in this like kind of digital era where you can see everything's so visual.
I completely agree. And the fact that you've got to start thinking about your colours, your fonts, what your social media is going to look like, your general aesthetic, and then it's got to match you as a person and your music. And again, same point again, make sure you like it, not what you think is really hot right now. And what was that tweet by Rob Kahn, the Radio 1 playlister, who he did all of the red Lewis Capaldi and another artist, and all of them had the same...
It's like a red tint to their artwork, and they obviously, the labels were like, oh, that's doing well, that's doing well in the market,
we'll find it after the podcast and we'll put it on the final edit so people can see the tweet. But basically it just showed that everyone was going for the same thing and they all thought they were being original, and they weren't. Everyone's just following a trend. They're all signed to the same labels who have the same ideas. So just make sure you've got unique ideas that you can create. And I think image is so important now, even more so than it was before back in the 90s, because you go on streaming platforms and if you don't have a good image, you don't have good artwork, you don't have good photography, people aren't going to take you seriously as an artist when they see your profile.
What I try to always explain to people, because I think quite often we use the word brand and branding and people are like, I don't really get what it is. And what I always try to explain is, think of your favourite artist. In your mind right now, you'll be able to picture a colour palette, so colours that they use. You'll be able to picture a font, most probably. In your mind right now, you'll have kind of their overall image, that what you're picturing right now is their brand. And it's the same for businesses. Like if you think about Coca-Cola, you're thinking red, you're thinking about their font, you're thinking about the Father Christmas, all things like that. That's their brand. And when a company or a musician has a fantastic brand, it's memorable and people kind of connect with it. And I think in the early stages, it's very important to find your branding, basically, because it's something that can stick with you and it's something that can really resonate with an audience really quickly. And I think what's important with your brand is it needs to fit your target audience, because there's no point having a brand that's polar opposite to a target audience and they're not going to basically like it, because then they won't engage with your content, they won't listen to your music if it doesn't fit a style, I'd say.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And remember that it is changeable. Like, so in the early stages, I mean, I know you're talking about long term, but in the early stages, when you've only got a few hundred followers, you can play around a little bit. And I think some artists, especially when it comes to naming themselves, they spend more time finding a name than they do on their music and making good music and just educating themselves.
Why don't you explain how Alex came up with the name Burstamo? Alex came up with the logo. Do you want to explain how you did that? Because I think that's exactly how a musician should do it.
So I have been involved in lots of different companies, lots in the music industry with lots of different bands, and I saw a pattern emerge where you would spend weeks thinking of your name. You'd spend another few weeks on the logo, and then months have passed and you haven't accomplished anything. So I gave myself 10 minutes to come up with a word, and the only thing was the .com had to be available, and that was it. And I just kept putting lots of words together. It was like burst of streams and burst of, I don't know, like just write things down, put two things together, and it doesn't matter. Think of Virgin, Google, Polydor. They don't mean anything. They only mean something when like people start using it and you start using it.
Think about it. The Arctic Monkeys.
Yeah.
That's a shit name. Like that's a really bad name, I think. Like if someone said to you right now, I'm going to call my band Arctic Monkeys, you'd be like, that's awful, mate. But it's when someone builds their brand, that name doesn't, like, you don't think of it as like an Arctic monkey anymore, do you?
And it's a surreal feeling when we have a meeting with an artist and they say, oh, I really want to work with Burstamo, and I think I just made that up.
It's just a random word.
Made up that word, and that's what it's going to be like for you. So don't worry about your name. It will just become you, and you will just grow into it. Focus on the music and just creating good music and creating good content for your socials.
So we've spoken about branding as a whole. Maybe we should go into that a little bit more. So that includes a logo, a colour palette, your overall image, really. What do you suggest for a logo? Do you suggest in the early stages literally just having the name, and as you progress, spending a little bit more time on it?
Oh yeah, it can be anything you want. Just make sure it's something recognizable, something unique, and just create something. I think a logo for an artist isn't as essential as the name. I see a lot of artists do.
I don't know the logos for the majority of artists.
No, I don't
Drake,
either.
Adele, Rihanna. No, none of them have logos really.
Yeah, they changed the look per album.
Have the owl? Or was that an artwork? I don't know.
No, I don't know either. But it's really not that important at all. You just have to stick with your name and just start, basically.
So you haven't released music yet, but you enjoy making music in your bedroom. You've started to think about this brand, your artist name, your logo. I think the next step is creating some social media accounts. We get asked this question a lot. Do I release music first or create social media content first? And I don't think there's a right answer.
No, not necessarily. It's a chicken and egg situation. Because maybe you have inspiration on the social media side first, go for it. If you've got inspiration on the music side first, go for that. And I always think it's kind of looked down upon to be a content creator first musician
I
second.
get that.
And believe me, they are winning right now. The people who can create content and do music second, and there are so many examples of it, especially those YouTubers who are releasing tracks and blowing up because they have that fan base and that content. They are going to win the music industry in the next 10 years.
They already are, and I think there are tons of artists now doing it the other way around, and they're struggling a little bit. They've released music and they're struggling to keep growing their fan base. They're struggling to keep their audience because there's so much competition. So they've started creating content, and because they didn't do it from day one, they don't know where to begin. Like Dylan Francis, Dylan Francis is a producer, is a DJ, and he's started creating YouTube content. His social media following is huge now. He started featuring in different vloggers' videos, and his music, because of this, is getting a lot more exposure. And I think that situation, it could have been either way around. He could have created content first and released music, or vice versa. And I think there's not a correct kind of full strategy for it that we could say, if you do this, you're going to succeed. But I do think creating social media accounts under your artist name, instead of having personal ones, is always the right move, because we often see people releasing music and they've got their personal account and they start pushing it through their personal, and they try to transform their personal account into their music account, and that's not a good move.
We get a lot of backlash for this as well when we every time we put this in our content, because we get people saying to us that I don't really like where the music industry is going if this is how you need to be successful. And the truth is, we create content to help you guys be successful. And if that is the way you need to be successful, we're going to put it in our content. It doesn't mean every single person who watches this video now needs to go out and start creating content. What we mean is that is one of the best routes for success in 2019. And if you can't create content for social media, if you don't want to be a vlogger, you don't have to be. There are other ways you can create content.
I've filmed it. I don't know if it will be live on YouTube when this is, but I filmed a video talking about different ways to promote yourself outside of social media, and I covered things like having a blog and having a podcast and all things like that aren't the traditional holding a camera and talking to it. And I do think that artists should look into these other ways, because I know a lot of artists that just don't enjoy social media and they feel like they're not a social media person. But at the end of the day, it's not just the music industry that's doing this. If you look at the film industry, if you look at any creative industry, any industry really in the world right now, everyone's on social media. The major brands right now are having to change their whole marketing strategy. They're pulling TV ads, they're pulling radio ads, they're pulling all of that, and they're pushing their budget into social media, into influencers. And we're not saying it because we think the music industry's transformed into it. We're saying it because the world has transformed onto it. And that's why we create content, because it's the best way to get our brand out there and communicate with the emerging artists and the music community. We wouldn't say it if it didn't work.
And if there's anything people take from this, if you don't feel comfortable creating social media content, the one thing I would take from it is don't treat your social media like a website. I think that's weird to me that people think that their social media has to be updated. They've got a gig. Is it on our Instagram? Is it on our Facebook? We need it on right now. That is just boring and everyone's doing it. You need to recalibrate at least to know what social media is, which is a feed of content for people to consume constantly.
When we first got into this, we said that you shouldn't be getting your personal account and changing that into your music account. The reason we say this is because your personal account is your family and friends. So what you'll find, as soon as you start putting out music content, you're not creating that for your target audience. You're not creating that to promote your music. You're creating that content to show your friends and family what you're doing still. And that's not what a music profile is about. Drake is not creating content to show his mum. He's creating content to engage with his audience. And it's the exact same for you. So I do really push you to create a separate profile to your personal one. Maybe don't even tell your friends and family in the early stages, so there isn't that pressure. There isn't that kind of, if you tell all your family and friends, they're just going to go across to it anyway.
I've spoken to a lot of people who've said there is like a subliminal thing going on in their brain where they need to start fresh because they feel like they need to be successful straight away because their friends and family are watching and they're watching their every move, and they end up doing silly things like buying followers and just cutting corners because they've got that pressure. Whereas you're more likely to do it organic, start fresh, don't even tell any of your friends and family what the account is. Just start fresh and create good content that people want to follow.
When we first started creating content, we were running ads on the content heavily. And I know, I had a lot of messages from friends and family being like, your ads just come up on my profile. And they were sort of taking the mick a little bit. And for a little bit, I was like, oh, I need to think about the content we're putting out. I need to make sure I'm doing this, this, and this. I need to make sure our followers are growing. And we don't do that. We literally couldn't care less about kind of friends and family viewing it. They don't really follow it. And that's the best way to do it.
Your friends and family have like stopped watching.
Yeah, they don't care.
The people in the early stages who weren't in it for the content anyway have all gone.
Because they're not enjoying the content. They're enjoying seeing the persons in the content. So definitely have a separate account. Focus on the content you're putting out and focus on that theme that you want to have. We do so many videos, so many podcasts. We've done full blog posts on finding a theme. And I think it's really important in the early stages to experiment a little bit because you're not going to know what works. You might find that doing covers doesn't actually feel right to you and it feels slightly forced. So don't do that. You might find that behind the scenes footage and telling your journey is more your style.
Just give it time though, because you can't just try content for 2 posts and then see how it does. And the hashtags got me a few likes, but that's it really. Like you've got to think in blocks of like 20 pieces of content. For us, it was like, if we're going to start a YouTube channel, let's try like 10 videos or 20 videos. And you can't just judge results off just a few posts, but you do need to find a theme for your social media. And I say that because people don't follow an Instagram account because the music is good or something is aesthetically nice. They follow it because there is something on it that they want to see more of. They are saying, I want to see more of you. I want your next post to be on my timeline. So how do you sell that? How do you create content where people are going to want to see more of it? And don't try and just attract everyone at the same time. Some people aren't going to like your content. You've got to accept that and just keep going for what you know and find your niche, and you'll have a loyal audience rather than just a mass audience.
What I'd recommend you doing as well is to go onto your Instagram right now, scroll, and every single post to every single account you come across that isn't a sponsored ad, look at that profile and say to yourself, why do I follow them? And you will have a reason. Like you do it without realizing. You will follow an account and you won't be in your head saying, I'm going to gain X, Y, and Z from this. You just follow it because you want to. But you will be following it for a reason. So even if that's an Instagram model, you'll be following them because you find them attractive or you want to be like them. You might follow someone because you're getting fashion inspiration. You might follow them because you just find their content funny. There's always a reason for why you're doing it. You don't just hit follow because it's like because your finger does it. You do it because there's a reason. So look at those reasons and then look at to what those audiences, what accounts have the audiences that you want, and see what sort of content they're creating. And you'll find that it's often a similar theme. So they're all quite often in some of the larger artists, they're just documenting their journey and people follow it because they want to see the behind the scenes of a large artist. Sometimes big rappers, they just putting on how much money they have and people want to follow it because they're like, oh, I'd love to be that rich. There's always a different reason for it.
But just remember that putting out now and advertising your music puts people off. It really puts people off. If you've created content and that's all you've got, then the chances are people aren't going to listen just because they landed on your Instagram profile. You've got to persuade people, and it's incredibly cheap to get people's attention on social media. So use it to get streams and basically grow your fan base.
What's the phrase that Gary Vee says? Punch, punch, right hook.
Jab, right hook. So basically he says that you don't just go in for the kill straight away. You warm people up. You have a warm audience. When they're hot, then you go in for the right hook, go in for the kill and say, stream my music.
I think a good example of that is go to your favourite artist right now and they'll most probably have a couple of stories up. And it will be jab, jab. And then the final one will be a right hook. It will be like, here's me talking to the camera. Here's a picture of me by the pool. Here's me behind the scenes at a gig. Next one. By the way, I've got a track out. There's always going to be a right hook. But because you have all of those jabs, you have all of those things that are benefiting you, you get to the right hook. So it's always going to be like educational or entertaining. But then there's going to be that little thing that like, by the way, could you do this for me? And it's the same with businesses. It's the same with absolutely everything. nothing really is for free. And if you look at what people are going to be offering you, there's always going to be something there. And I think that's the same with musicians. You can offer all of this amazing content and you can engage with your audience, and then you can also add that little thing in there which will benefit you. But just trying to take constantly will not get you any engagement or not get you any followers. You'll end up losing followers.
Should we talk about the music side as well? Mm-hmm. Essentially, when you start, you've got to find a distributor and you've got to actually get your music out there. For those of you who don't know what a distributor is or does, it is someone who will get your music on all of the digital streaming platforms. Mm-hmm. Back in the day, they will make CDs and tapes and get it in stores and things like that. Now they just get it in stores, i.e. Spotify, iTunes, Deezer, Amazon Music, that kind of thing. And they will collect all of the royalties for you. They're essentially what a record label would do, but you can do it independently yourself. So we always recommend DistroKid for our clients. We like them. CD Baby are good as well. They've got an amazing podcast, so listen to that as well.
Yeah.
And also the reason we like DistroKid is because they get you on the Spotify for Artists quickly.
Yeah.
And it's something we often say you need to get your music on Spotify for Artists. If you don't know why that is, it's because that is your way to get on Spotify official playlists, and that is your way of being able to submit it to the curators who will listen to your track and decide whether it's worthy of a spot on the playlist. It's the only way you can get to the curators now. So get your music on early, at least 4 weeks before release.
With your first ever release, you need to do it, obviously, as we say, 4 weeks prior, but you can also email DistroKid and say, can you give me access to my Spotify for Artists? Because with your first release, it won't naturally happen because you won't already have access. So ask them to get access. They'll happily do it for you, and then you can submit.
That's a very good point, actually.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about that. I'm talking like 2 months ago, you weren't able to get access to your Spotify for Artists on your first release. And
this was mental.
What we used to advise people to do, and sometimes still do, is release a track, any track, not your favorite track. Just get your profile locked down, get your artist name locked down, and then you release your main track that you want to submit to the editors. And I'm pleased you reminded me about that because it's so important. You're right, now you can push them to get Spotify for Artists, but
some of the distributors still don't do that though. That's why we always recommend DistroKid.
I still haven't seen an artist get an official on their very, very first release.
We've done it before.
Have we?
Yeah. So there was Dream Dive got Fresh Finds Poptronic.
That's true. Yeah.
Somebody's Child got
that's
Breath of Fresh Air, and maybe Hot New Bands.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about.
So we've had it a few times before.
Yeah.
But we always say I think this is a good topic to go into.
Yeah.
Do not expect much from your debut release. And I don't want to sound harsh because you're probably expecting to, but it's the chances of you getting a Spotify editorial playlist on your first one are very slim.
Yeah.
And it's just your first release, the chances of it blowing up are small, and every artist that has blown up from their debut release is usually a one-hit wonder.
Yeah, true.
So don't take your debut release as like so much pressure, this needs to blow up, otherwise I need to quit music. Take it as a bit of a test. See how people react to it. See if the marketing you're doing around it is successful, and then you can work on your next one.
Yeah.
Don't get too attached to each release, and a lot of artists find this hard because you do spend a lot of time, energy, money on your music, but if you spend too much time on each release, you're wasting your time. You should do like a month around it, but don't just keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it.
Yeah, I agree. And like how artists need to think, what are the probabilities of me being added to an official, and then like half it. Maybe even like 10% chance of that, because it is so difficult. How many tracks now on Spotify a day? Like,
we get, I'd say, a DM at least once a day on our Instagram saying, I've submitted via the Spotify for Artists like you told me, and I'm not on an official.
Yeah.
There are over 40 million songs on Spotify, 4 million of which have never been listened to. Yeah. Never. And there are around 4,500 editorial playlists. So that percentage, I'm not going to work it out, I'm not that good at maths, is not very big at all. Yeah. So the chances of you getting on it are so slim, but because you always see it on social media, you always see your friends getting it, you see emerging artists that haven't released many songs yet doing, you think it's so doable, but it is hard.
But how many emerging artists do you follow who didn't as well?
There's just so much music on there, so don't approach it as if you don't get it, you failed. It's just a long-term game.
Assume you're not going to get one. Now what's your strategy? That's how you should really think. And then the chances are you'll get one if you think like that, because you'll make all the right moves in order to get the attention from the right people.
Alongside kind of finding your theme on social media and finding your image, you need to sort of think about potential angles for approaching the media. And we've done a lot of videos. We've done a full podcast on what you can do before releasing. So you should check that one out. But there are a few things that you should think about when it's your debut release and you're pitching to the media, so press and radio. And that one thing in those early stages is, what makes me different?
Yeah.
And you might say to yourself, nothing makes me different. There are things such as being gay, being Christian, being a female. There are specific media outlets.
Location is a big one.
All of those things that give you something to go with to the media. So if you're gay, there is specific LGBTQ playlists and radio stations and blogs. The same with region. There's specific blogs for Scottish artists, Irish artists. So think about your angle. Think about what makes you different, what makes you not like any other artist or kind of the large percentage of artists, and stick with that and try and focus on that a little bit.
All you need is just that one angle, that one headline which gets you that to be able to put in the description of the Spotify for Artists form, having been featured on or featured in, and then just list all those places. Is if you've got a big buzz around you, people are talking about you, and it gives you credibility as an artist. No, you're not going to blow up from one magazine feature, but you can use it as an asset on your artist CV.
I think we've covered everything. If you think that in our podcast or a YouTube video there is something we can go into more depth about, definitely let us know. And I hope you did find this useful. Let us know on our Instagram what you're thinking of these podcasts, because maybe we can look at doing twice a week now. But thanks for listening or watching on YouTube, and we'll be back with another one soon.